Alright guys, today we're going to go over my Game Boy Advance collection, and we'll go over the few other Game Boy games I have. Let's get into it. Alright, first off, we'll go over the box games I have. First off, got Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure. This one is probably the Game Boy Advance game I have the most nostalgia for. Obviously, the Crash Bandicoot series is my favorite game series of all time, and of any of the handheld games, this is the one I have the most amount of time with. It's an okay game. Like, it's a very crude interpretation of the PS1 games put on Game Boy, and it's fine the way it is, but I'll have more to talk about it at a later time. And the same thing kind of goes for Crash 2 Entranced. Like, I think it's slightly better than The Huge Adventure, but not really by much. I'll have more to talk about it at a later time. Next up, got Crash Purple. I mean, this game's terrible. It's an awful minigame collection. Really not the best utilization of the Crash and Spyro franchises put together. They really could have done something better. Next up, got Spyro Season of Ice. I really love the cover art for this game. Gameplay-wise, I don't know. These Spyro games on GBA, they're okay. I feel like the isometric view is like as good as they could have gotten, using the traditional Spyro formula, but I just don't think they're that fun, and just, with how little you can see of the maps and stuff, they can get kind of confusing, but they're okay. I'd say they're probably better games than the Crash games on GBA. Next up, got Monsters Inc. I happen to have the manual for this. It's fine. This is like, I think, one of the first Game Boy Advance games that was ever released. It's a really basic side-scroller. Not much to say here, but I do find it funny that they also advertised the Game Boy Color version on the manual. Which is kind of weird. And then I've got Frogger's Adventures, Temple of the Frog. This is actually, I think, a pretty good game. It's a pretty good Frogger game. This is like one of those weird games that it seems like almost everybody who had a Game Boy Advance either knows of or had this game. Yeah. All right. Next up on the Game Boy Color, I've got YuGiOh Dark Duel Stories. Strangely enough, I've had this game, I think, out of any game I'm looking at here, I've had this game the longest. I remember having this exact copy when I was like 6 or 7. But I never liked Yu-Gi-Oh! And anytime I ever tried to play this game, I just didn't understand it at all. So I really have no idea if this is supposed to be a good game. I imagine it's not. I mean, trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh! On such a tiny screen as a Game Boy Color game, that does not sound fun to me at all. Next up, got Pokemon Fire Red. Next up, got Pokemon Fire Red. It's hard for me to decide whether Generation 3 or Generation 4 is my favorite Pokemon generation, but Gen 3 is probably the one I have the most nostalgia for. These are the games that I can just most easily jump into and beat and then just move on. I really love Fire Red. I think it's the absolute definitive way to play Generation 1. I don't think there's a reason to go back to Red and Blue and Yellow. It's just a great game. Next up, got Lilo and Stitch 2. I played it for a bit. It's okay. Next up, got the movie tie-in game for ScoobyDoo, the live-action one. Don't have much to say about the game, but the movie, God, that movie's just so strange, man. All the weird stuff in it, Hot Velma, the weird twist with Scrappy-Doo, that movie's just a freaking fever dream. Jesus. Next up, got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on Game Boy Color. It's a really crude interpretation of a skateboarding game. There's really no reason to play it. Next up, got Pokemon Emerald. This is my favorite Pokemon game. I mean, the amount of content that you get on this cartridge is pretty incredible. And there's a reason why it's the most valuable Pokemon game. It's just absolutely incredible from start to finish. And, yeah, not much to say besides it's just a great game. Next up, got Spyro Attack of the Rhinox. This is just another one of the isometric Spyro games. I can't really because I've played all of them, but I can't really picture exactly which one is which. They all kind of bleed in together to me. They're all very similar. But I mean, I'm sure this one is just as good as the other ones. Next up, we got Bionicle Heroes. This is a Game Boy Advance game that has some 3D models in it. It's always fun playing a GBA game for the first time and then seeing actual 3D graphics. It always kind of looks funny. But this game is it's just like a run and gun game, and it's actually pretty fun. Next up, we got Buzz Lightyear Star Command. This is actually another run and gun game. I played the first level of it, and I feel like this game is just way too easy. I was just running through everything, and I feel like I just couldn't die at all. Graphics are very primitive, and yeah, I don't know what was up with this. Next up, got Super Mario Advance 2. I mean, this is a great way to play Super Mario World. It's pretty much the same as that game. I always like playing as Luigi. Maybe that's, you know, because I'm like super casual and he's just really easy to play with because of his jumping mechanics. But yeah, I like Super Mario World. I don't think I've ever beaten it. Like I know I've at least played like half the game. I don't know. It's just one of those comfort games where like I feel very comfortable playing like the first few levels and then kind of just dropping it off. But it's one I'll have to finish one day. Next up, we got Crash Nitro Kart. I'd say it's actually a rather ambitious port. They definitely put a lot of effort into this that they definitely didn't need to. Like, I almost dare say this is better than the console version, but that's really not saying much. I actually would rather play this game than the Mario Kart game on GBA, so it's got that going for it. But again, like the Mode 7 style of Car Racer is just like, they're just outdated. Like, they're really just not fun to play anymore, at least for me. Next up, got The Sims Bustin' Out. Don't remember too much about it, but I think it's like an RPG almost. It's not really like a Sims game. It's more just like you have a character, like you gotta level up their stats and stuff, if I remember correctly. Next up, got Tetris, an absolute classic. This is probably like, if I had to choose just like one Game Boy game, not Color, not Advanced, one Game Boy game to just keep and play it forever, it would definitely be Tetris. I mean, this is probably the most accessible game of all time. Pretty much you can put this in front of anybody and they're gonna know how to play it within a minute. Great game. Next up, got Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. This is probably my favorite Kirby game. At least it's the only one I've ever completed. A lot of nostalgia for this one. I mean, it's just a great recreation of Kirby's realm. The sprite work is absolutely incredible. Great game. Next up, got the Star Wars Episode 2 tie-in game on the GBA. This is actually a pretty good side-scroller. I don't have too much experience with this one, but I do have more experience with the Episode 3 game. Spy Kids 3D, the GBA tie-in game. Have not played it. Top Gun Guts and Glory on the Game Boy. Not good. Next up, got DK King of Swing. When I was younger, I played a lot of DK Jungle Climber on the DS, which is like technically the sequel to this. I tried playing this for a bit, and I mean, it's basically just DK Jungle Climber, but more primitive, as it should be. Not one I'm probably going to go back to. Like, if I'm going to play a game like this, I'll just go play Jungle Climber because it's just more fleshed out and is pretty much better in every single way. But, I mean, an interesting game nonetheless. Next up, got Star Wars Episode 3, the tie-in game. This is a pretty good game. I remember playing and beating this as a kid and coming back to it. It was a cool experience, just seeing, like, how in-depth they were able to make the combat on a GBA game. It was just really cool. I think if I remember correctly, this and the DS version are like pretty much exactly the same. It's just that the DS version adds like a menu or something on the bottom screen. So either way, if you could pick up this version or the DS version, I'd highly recommend it. Next up, got Namco Museum. Nothing to say here. Next up, F1 Race. This is another game I've had in my collection for a very long time. I don't remember how I got it, and I don't remember ever playing it. Next up, got Mario Pinball Land. Pretty cool pinball game. You think, you know, this is just Mario but pinball, right? But they add in this like adventure mode where you have to collect stars, and it's actually pretty in-depth, and there's a lot of content here. It's actually pretty good. Next up, Tony Hawk's Underground. There were a lot of Tony Hawk games on the GBA. This is just one of them. And they all are kind of the same. They're just isometric, like, skating games. They're fine, but they served their purpose back when they were created, but I don't really see too much reason to go back to these nowadays. TMNT 2 Battle Nexus. I tried playing it for a bit. It seems like a fine side-scroller. I don't know. Alright guys, that was my Game Boy collection as of 2023. Thanks for watching.